transaction. As about the security and safety of the merchandise in the warehouse, Mr. Jawo said security personnel are being employed by the company who work on shift basis day and night. He said there are also CCTV cameras installed all over the warehouse facility. Mr. Boka Jawara later joined the meeting and his position that he did not import the guns to create any instability in the country, as insinuated in some quarters. He recounted the rigorous processes and procedures that he had to go through before he could be granted license to purchase the firearms. Conclusion. Having considered the submissions of various expert witnesses from the security sector and other stakeholders, considering the established fact that Gage Security Company Limited was issued a blanket license with serial number 0026918 by the Office of the Inspector General of Police, which was the appropriate authority to do so at the time of issuance, noting the discrepancy observed by the Attorney General and Minister of Justice between the license and the end-user certificate regarding the terms and conditions of the license meant for the importation of firearms and the attempt to substitute an end-user certificate for a license in determining compliance with the law, considering that Section 6 of the Arms and Ammunition Act 2009 unequivocally stated that a person shall not import into the Gambia any firearms, arms of war, or ammunition, except under and in strict accordance with the terms and conditions of an import license duly granted in that behalf by the prescribed authority and such terms and conditions attached to the import license. The National Assembly Standing Committee on Defense and Security hereby concludes that there were administrative lapses in the implementation of the provision of the Act, therefore leaving a loophole that makes enforcement untenable. Such lapses could be due to the absence of a multidisciplinary force that could make ballistic analysis possible before the granting of license based on consideration of the specification presented in the applications, the need for more capacity building in the issuance process or the absence of a rigorous checks and balances procedure in the administration of the Act. Notwithstanding, our findings reveal that gaps exist in the administration of the Act, which could give way to unintentional security breaches, which ought to be sealed with administrative and legislative reforms and capacity building. Our recommendations. The committee hereby resolves to recommend as follows. A blanket license which does not stipulate the specification and quantity of firearms that a company is authorized to import or state the terms and conditions for the grant of the license should never be issued again by the issuing authority. B, standard specifications of the appropriate type of hunting guns for importation should be determined by the Ministry of Interior and published in the Gazette to guide the review process in granting license for the importation of firearms. C, henceforth, before any authorization is given for the importation of hunting guns, the specification of the hunting guns should be submitted and subjected to ballistic analysis by a competent expert or body of experts to determine whether or not the firearms fall within the category of military weapons that are deadly to human targets. The report should be of primary consideration in determining the issuance of license to import the guns. D, a tripartite inspectorate team should be established to monitor the requisite forms that should be put in place to be used by village alcalo, district chief, regional governor, regional police commissioner, and the applicant to gather all the security and safety details necessary to consider applications and further guide and save the security importation, storage, sale, usage, and upkeeping of hunting guns, and upkeeping of hunting guns, ensure quarterly reports to the IGP on the status of sales and of the firearms, the security and safety standards at the warehouse, the personal details of all individuals that purchase firearms with the serial number of the guns purchased, the amount paid, and the findings of the periodic tracking of the usage of the weapon. E, an effective and efficient machinery should be put in place to prevent reoccurrence or a moratorium on the importation of hunting guns not to be considered pending the necessary reforms to avoid lapses that could be detrimental to national and human security. F, the Arms and Ammunition Act 2009 should be subjected to review by the ballistics, security, and legal experts with the view to effect no amendments to proper enactment that would be informed by the security concerns of the people and the country. And G, periodic reports should be submitted to the National Assembly in order to assess and register progress made in the implementation of the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Any seconder to the report? Honorable Member for Lower Nyomi, please.
I rise to second the motion.
Thank you. I now put the question. It has been moved and seconded that this Honorable House do consider the report of the Standing Committee on Defense and Security on alleged importation of unlicensed gun into the Gambia by the proprietor guide company. Those in favor, please say aye. Those not in favor, please say no. The ayes have it. Any honorable member who wishes to take part in the debate may do so by raising he or her constituency tag. Take note of it. I will start with Jara East. The floor is yours. Continue raising your tag if you want to.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me the floor. I rise to contribute my quota on the report of the National Assembly Standing Committee on Defense and Security on the alleged importation of unlicensed firearms and ammunition into the country by Gachi Security Company Limited in 2019. Honorable Speaker, before I proceed with my interventions, I would like to draw the attention of this August Assembly to page 6. To page 6. Page 6, I intend to make some correction. I know it must be an oversight, where you have the IGP indicated that the unauthorized consignment was impounded for investigations. This was followed by a tripartite consultation between the Office of the IGP, the Chief of Defense Staff, and the Director General of the National Intelligence Agency. Honorable Speaker, the word tripartite means three. And in English language, when you use the word between, it is between two things, two items or two entities. You don't say tripartite between three entities. When you say tripartite, it means three, but you say tripartite consultation between the Office of the IGP, the Chief of Defense Staff, and the Director General. It should be among. Okay, having said that, Honorable Speaker, we are dealing with an important report that has to do with guns, firearms, guns and ammunition. Honorable Speaker, the issue of guns is not a child's play, for it has to do with lives and livelihoods. Honorable Speaker, I have read the report this morning, and I have my observations. I will not take your time too long, Honorable Speaker. Yes, let me quickly refer the August Assembly to page 8. Page 8. Page 8, 14, number 14. That since the above mentioned arms were not covered by the license and end user certificate, the act of the company then falls short of legality. Underline, it falls short of legality, and therefore amounts to unlawful importation of firearms contrary to Section 6 of the Firearms and Ammunition Act. Honorable Speaker, before the CEO was issued with the license, I think he must have made some consultations with some of the security experts that are working in his company. And I'm sure he must have consulted the experts that are in our police department. Honorable Speaker, after having done these consultations, the CEO is still in breach of the License and Firearms Act. Honorable Speaker, the CEO, I beg your pardon, according to the license and the end user certificate that was given to the CEO, he was authorized to import yes, help me, 12? Yes, 1,250. And the CEO exceeded by 13. He managed to import 13, apart from the authorized one. Honorable Speaker, it does not require much intelligence to know what the CEO is up to. But Honorable Speaker, this is very clear. You are asked to import a certain
observation.
amount. Okay. Observation? Observation?
Yeah.
Yes.
Honorable Speaker, the honorable member should really, if he would listen to what I have to say, listen to the language of the report and to know that these are security concerns. And he is free to deal with the committee in certain clarification, but the position of the Attorney General is clear. And we've already identified where the shortcomings are between the end user certificate and a license. So essentially, it will be very helpful if we do not analyze, if we give recommendations how to prevent recurrence. But judgment will be detrimental to the party that is already found by the chambers not to be in breach of the law, even though those elements are clear. But by virtue of the fact that the instruction is that the license should contain all the terms and conditions. And what this document is saying is that the license did not contain the terms and conditions. It's only the end user certificate that contains the terms and conditions, and you cannot substitute a license for an end user certificate. That is the position of that's the legal opinion of the Attorney General's chambers. So it will not be fair to indict anybody at the level of the Parliament. That's the opinion I would want to express for the member to bear in mind.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member, for your observation as a member of the committee. But before taking the floor, of the House observation. I only had observation, but before I said go ahead, you are already up. So bear in mind, next time you have to go by the rules. Thank you. Honorable Member for Jara is please.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and thank you, Member for Sedekunda. I have not disputed the recommendation of the Ministry of Justice. I have not disputed that. What I'm saying, I am worried with regards to the disparity that exists between what is authorized and that which was added. And I think that's my detached opinion. I'm worried, and I want clarification as to why that disparity exists. Because when you say 10, and you add another 5 on top of the 10, there exists a disparity. And I want clarification as to why that disparity exists. Thank you. Honorable Speaker, if we go to, let's go to the recommendations very quickly, recommendations of the committee. Sorry, the conclusions of the committee. And with your indulgence, it reads, having considered the submissions of various expert witnesses from the security sector and other stakeholders, considering the established fact that Gachi Security Company Limited was issued a blanket license with serial number 0026918 by the Office of the Inspector General of Police, which was the appropriate authority to do so at the time of issuance. Noting the discrepancy observed by the Attorney General and Minister of Justice between the license and the end-user certificate regarding the terms and conditions to a license meant for the importation of firearms and the attempt to substitute an end-user certificate for a license in determining compliance with the law, considering that Section 6 of the Arms and Ammunition Act 2009 unequivocally states that a person shall not import into the Gambia any firearms, arms of war or ammunition except under and in strict accordance with the terms and conditions of an import license duly granted in that behalf by the prescribed authority and such terms and conditions attached to the import license. The National Assembly Standing Committee on Defense and Security hereby concludes that there were administrative lapses in the implementation of the provision of the Act, thus leaving a loophole that makes enforcement untenable. Such lapses could be due to the absence of a multidisciplinary force that could make ballistic analysis possible before the granting of a license based on consideration of the specifications presented in the applications, the need for more capacity building in the issuance process, or the absence of a rigorous checks and balance procedures in the administration of the Act. Notwithstanding, our findings reveal that gaps exist in the administration of the Act, which could give way to unintentional security breaches, which ought to be sealed with administrative and legislative reforms and capacity building. Honorable Speaker, after having read the conclusions of the committee and the recommendations, and after having known that either the IGP or the CEO of Gachi, one of them must be found culpable, I have not seen in their recommendations or in their conclusions any punitive measure, any punitive action that's supposed to be taken against both of them. But what I have seen, the committee have recommended for both of them to escape scot-free. And we are dealing with guns. We are dealing with guns. These guns, some of them are lethal. Some of them are lethal. The moment you talk of guns, Honorable Speaker, the mere blast of a gun will make people to run helter-skelter. So guns are not child play. They are not child play. For a layman, how will a layman know that this is blank ammunition? This gun is meant to kill games, hunting games. animals, birds. That is for the security to determine that. But for the laymen, they are not at liberty to know that. And these guns have to do with life. And what the CEO has done is in flagrant violation of the License Act. Because he was told in a language that he understood very well. But yet still, he went ahead to import another 13 extra. And you're telling me that, you're telling us that somebody who is responsible for that act should be allowed to go scot-free? Is that the language of the committee? That both the IGP or the CEO should be left to go scot-free? This has to do with life. And there is no substitute for life. There is no substitute for life. Life is very dear. And who knows? The 13 that were added, whether they will fall into the wrong hands, who knows? Who knows? We have to respect the sanctity of life. Life is very important. There is no substitute for life. This gun has to do with life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member for Jara East. May I now call on Honorable Member for Banjul North.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I want to start by saying that the committee had done a very, very good job. The approach, the issue is circumspection, and that in a very professional way. I commend you for that. And I think the reports definitely advises us as to the appropriate approach to take. Let me start with the conclusion of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice, or the Minister of Justice, in terms of their advice when it was being sought. That, Honorable Speaker, with your permission, page 11, it could not find a prima facie evidence to establish that the importer commits an offense by importing firearms into the country as his license was issued for that purpose, or that the importation contravenes the terms and conditions of an import license as there was none attached. And the committee, in their engagement, thorough engagement, concludes that there were administrative lapses in the implementation of the provision of the Act, thus leaving a loophole that makes enforcement untenable. And they identified that some of these lapses could be the non-existence of a multidisciplinary force that could make ballistic analysis possible before the granting of license based on consideration of the specifications presented in the application. So that's the challenge before us, that the process through which this development had to pass through had some lapses. And then the way to go is to correct those lapses so as to avoid recurrence. And I think there's also this distinction by the staff of GAJ between ammunition and firearms. We ought to bear that in mind, that this consignment is about firearms, it's for hunting. But also you can see expert advice saying that some of these weapons could be lethal to the human being. So I believe that as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing much to say but to recommend that we go by the recommendations of the committee based on their findings. But before I go there, I just want to ask, and if the mover of the motion can clarify that if you go to page 14, where you have the first paragraph, you have Mr. Samba Jao. Yes, Mr. Samba Jao. Further indicated, in every 3 months, the company writes a quarterly report to the police on the status of sales of the firearms accompanied with the relevant documents of transaction. I would want to know whether this would also involve information about the person, the purchaser of the weapon. I think that's important. That so far there were sales. Sales have taken place. Those who were sold these weapons, the authorities ought to know who they are, and then their contact address, their contacts, so that if there's any development in future, one can always, be able to trace. For the purpose of tracing, I want to know whether this is included. And according to our committee, if you go to page 15, the second paragraph, it states, notwithstanding our findings reveal that gaps exist in the administration of the Act which could give way to unintentional security breaches which ought to be sealed with administrative and legislative reforms and capacity building. I think this is what we should be doing now, going by the recommendation. We have identified the breaches, we have identified the lapses, that the challenge was that when the importer was made an application, there were no conditions, clear conditions, so that it gives room for the gap to be exploited, and that resulted in the importation of those weapons that were not listed in the application. What we ought to do now is, as I said, that the committee had really given us the way forward. If you go by E of the recommendations of the committee, an efficient and effective machinery should be put in place to prevent a recurrence or a moratorium on the importation of hunting guns be considered. I don't know, for the committee, with this, I would suggest to the committee, rather than it being considered, a moratorium should be imposed. As at now, all importation of guns, for whatever purpose, there should be an embargo, there should be moratorium. Let them hold on until we put our house in order. And putting the house in order is having the necessary legislative arrangements in place, like revisiting the Act, ensuring that no one could utilize, to address it so that no one could utilize the law in order to import arms that could be, posing a threat to our security. That is one. Having this administrative body in place, two, and then to have the processes as to what conditions one has to fulfill in order to import guns, what types of guns. I think this is the putting in-house into order, that these are the conditions. Unless these things are in place, we should stop importation of guns. And the guns that I don't know, it's up to this committee also, that we can even stop, but the fact that they came, and they started selling, and so far I think 200 something had already been sold. Like I said, we ought to know who bought them. But the remaining ones, we need to be following, scrutinizing those that are coming for them. I think that's my position, that I really support the recommendations. They are really have given us the way forward. Okay, like I said, the Arms and Ammunition Act 2009 should be subjected to review by ballistic security and legal experts with the view to effect amendments or proffer enactment that will be informed by the security concerns the people of this country. Guns are issues it's a matter of concern because they are instruments, they are weapons that can lead to death. And it is our duty to protect lives. Every life matters. And guns are instruments that can end life. And that is where our concern emanates. As lawmakers, we are duty-bound to ensure that there is peace and security in this country, and anything that coming to pose as a threat to that peace and security must be a matter of concern, and guns is one of them. Importation of guns should be strictly limited to for hunting purposes. We shouldn't allow guns that are lethal to human beings to be imported into this country. And I think the laws that we're going to make, we need to factor that. Other than the established state institution, that is the armed and security forces, other than them, no one should be allowed to import gun into this country. One can do it for business purposes, but it has to be firearms, as has been explained by Mr. Jao, purposely for hunting. Guns that cannot be lethal to the human being. I think we have to come up with that position. To end my intervention, I want to say that the committee has really done a very good job, and I really support the recommendations they have put forth, only to add that the moratorium, rather than being considered, must be imposed. There shouldn't be any importation henceforth until all these arrangements are in place. The law, the tripartite body comprising experts, security experts, is in place, and the procedures for importation of firearms also clearly spelled out. And then factoring my concern, that is only guns that are meant for hunting and are not a threat to human life should be allowed to be imported into this country. So on that note, once again, I thank the committee for doing the very good job. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. May I now call on Honorable Member for Sabah Sanjar.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I think my intervention will be very short because I have just few concerns in the report and some few, proposals to make. I first of all want to thank the committee for the explicit job they did, because the report is very comprehensive, detailed, and really understandable. You can simply comprehend what they want to say and what they have observed already. Going by the report, Honorable Speaker, if you go to the report of the panel, the investigator panel, the findings panel investigated or investigators reveal, among other things, point 1, that Abubakar Jawara is the proprietor and chief executive officer of Gaj Group, which comprises of Gaj Security Company Limited, Gaj Global, and Gaj Sand Mining. My concern here, page 6. Page 6. Yes, my concern here, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that one company is being issued a license to operate on 3 different businesses, which are really substantive businesses. For me, I would first of all make my first proposal. I don't know how this company is registered at the AG chambers, but